Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Some miles from this very room where we are seated today is the Kenyan coast. And there is a Swahili saying that where there are many, nothing goes wrong. And what this means is that the gathering here today to discuss conservation agriculture provides an opportunity not just for us to tap into this immense opportunity that conservation agriculture presents in Kenya and across the entire African continent, but to be able to discuss how we can be able to scale this within the perspective of the broader climate-smart agricultural approaches across the continent. Because as we're speaking today, the challenges facing Africa and Kenya are seemingly insurmountable, but what we know is that no problem can surpass human beings, because when spiders unite, they can hide, and a lion, as you can see on the screen. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, amidst the mixed basket of challenges and opportunities confronting not only Kenya but Africa today, we've heard food and nutritional insecurity, where over 240 million Africans go to bed hungry. We've heard 50% of mothers burying their kids before they reach their 5th birthday. And right here in Kenya, there are others who are food insecure, and this is projected to be increased by up to about 1 million before the end of the year. We're talking about the chronic youth unemployment, which currently, as we speak today, 12 million youth are joining the labor market every year. This means 1 million youth every month are getting to the labor market, competing just for 3 million jobs. And this is not just a serious issue, but an issue that has been christened a ticking time bomb. We're talking about post-harvest losses that are currently costing the African continent today $48 billion every year. And this necessitates annual imports of $35 billion, costing the continent not only foreign exchange, but actually losing jobs as well. And right here in Kenya, Kenya is actually losing up to about $500 million as a result of post-harvest losses. And reversing this means injecting an extra 50 billion Kenyan shillings into the local economy. And worst of all is climate change, which is already redefining the contours of the continent, even right here in Kenya. The climate change is the elephant in the room, already shrinking African economies and reversing the development gains that have been made. And right here in Kenya, just in the agricultural sector alone, a projected 1 degree temperature increase is projected to reduce crop revenue by about 14% in the next 2 years. With climate change in the picture, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this challenge, as bad as it is, will be compounded by multiplicities. And this is just but a sample of the sobering challenges that we face in the continent today. But what we know is that the Sustainable Development Goal might not be achieved if conservation agriculture and climate-smart agricultural approaches are not weaved into these Sustainable Development Goals, are not weaved into Kenyan own Vision 2030 or its derivative strategic Big Four priorities, including food security, manufacturing, health, and affordable healthcare. This predicament is simply unpalatable. Distinguished colleagues, what we know is that there is an African proverb that goes thus: he who earns calamity eats it with his family. What this insightful African proverb is telling us today is that Africa's calamity is our own calamity. Africa's calamity is global calamity, and consequently, our efforts to upscale conservation agriculture and climate-smart agricultural nature-based techniques must be in the context of charting solutions to address these diverse issues, whether it is youth unemployment, whether it is food and nutritional security, whether it is addressing issues that have to contribute to macroeconomic growth, and we must be able to do so in a way that can chart a pathway and lift people from the bottom of the pyramid. And this conference, especially with the team Conservation Agriculture Scaling Up, is a golden opportunity to do so. Distinguished colleagues, what I'm talking about, I'm talking of conservation agricultural techniques like minimum tillage, which has been expanded by colleagues that have spoken earlier. And these examples are dotted all across the African continent, including Kenya, where a farmer from Makueni County managed to maximize maize yields from her 1 acre farm, increasing yields by over 300%. I'm talking about conservation agriculture weaved into climate-smart agricultural approaches like intercropping, which has been used to change the microclimate in Uganda. Coffee fields to reduce temperatures by up to 2 to 5%, and the results being the losses of up to about 100 million annually averted, meaning more jobs have been created and incomes improve. I'm talking about nature-based actions like crop diversification, where in Zambia, practical evidence from the ground is showing farmers adopting improved sorghum varieties have increased their productivity twofold from harvesting 1.5 tons per hectare to 4.5 tons per hectare. A similar technique being used in Malawi, where farmers are substituting maize for high-value, climate-resilient sesame, has reduced food insecurity by an average of 1 month in the biting lean months and enhanced farmers' income by 20%. I'm talking of desired techniques in Western Africa that have actually rehabilitated up to about 300,000 hectares of cross-staged and barren lands in Niger, restoring productivity. And the list goes on and on. Increases as a result of climate-smart agricultural techniques, including conservation agriculture. And this companion that we're discussing here today can save farmers above 60% in labor, in time to enhance farm level. Overall, all these that we're discussing here today are providing an opportunity that after production, what needs to be done in using climate-smart agricultural techniques, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, using nature-based approaches where climate-smart agriculture, working with nature, not against nature, that has proven to enhance yields at reduced costs, that has proven to enhance livelihood, that has proven to enhance the capacity of the very ecosystems that are the foundation of livelihood, that underpin economic transformation across the globe today, and also has shown that it can enhance climate resilience. It's an opportunity. It's a triple benefit, and particularly crucial for Kenya in turning 80% of its landmass, which is arid and semi-arid, into rightful state of high productivity. With such, we are reminded of yet another African proverb that a path does not close with a man. The path does not close to a man with a machete. Such nature-based approaches like climate-smart agriculture is actually Africa's machete against the mounting socio-economic challenges and the changing climate that is already redefining the contour today. On the economic front, report after report and even practical evidence has shown that an increase of 10% in agricultural production will translate to approximately a 7% reduction in poverty, and reducing poverty more than in any other sector. This is captured in African Union Agenda 2063. This is captured in the Malabo Declaration of 2014. But what we know is that how we produce the maximization of the productivity of Africa's conservation, using conservation agricultural techniques or nature-based agricultural techniques, provides a critically viable route to speedily build climate resilience and meet the region's socio-economic challenges or priorities and safeguard the realization of our shared prosperity. But for this to happen, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we must be able to move from farm-level production because it is not enough. Moving from farm-level production means that it must be complemented by additional actions at both policy and operational levels. And therefore, the model for scalability becomes very, very important. A business model to scale these climate-smart agricultural techniques with conservation agriculture, taking the broader part of the continuum, is very, very crucial. And this scaling up means that we must be able to ensure that what we produce should be added value to using energy that is not destroying the environment, using clean energy, that utilizing solar power irrigation or adding value using solar drying or processing using clean energy or off-grid energy becomes very important. We must be able to ensure that the right financing must be in place. We must be able to ensure that policy, which is the biggest driver of change, should be able to create the enabling policy environment and foster and incentivize the multidisciplinary collaboration, bringing together state and non-state actors, as enshrined in Section 5 of the Paris Agreement, also in Sustainable Goal 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. And once this is put in place, it becomes very important that these aspects that are mentioned, there is one aspect that is actually the most important, especially for the African continent, which is Africa's sovereign world. It is Africa's human capital. It is its youthful, energetic population constituting over 200 million today. And this strong youthful population needs to be leveraged as the primary resource in driving the above enablers, their skills, their talents, their energy, their passion, their networks, the networks of these young people and all alike, adequately harnessed, could represent a priceless resource to scale climate-smart agricultural techniques, including conservation techniques. And these represent an opportunity, one that money can buy. If this is appropriately exercised, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this model, climate-smart agricultural techniques, conservation agricultural techniques, could potentially create as many jobs in the continent annually for the African youth, and this could catalyze the 1 trillion agroeconomy in less than 12 years from today, as report after report has shown. But for all these things to happen, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is very important to understand that for impacts across the entire continent, and right here in Kenya, both at policy and non-policy level, we need incentives. We need investments to be able to upscale this integrated paradigm shift of conservation agriculture, which constitutes the business model for scaling climate-smart agriculture. And for this to happen, we must connect the dots. Connecting the dots, ensuring that what is produced on farm using climate-smart agricultural techniques, like conservation agriculture, can only happen within an inclusive framework. An inclusive framework that brings civil societies, NGOs, international development organizations, UN agencies, and even individual citizens with the private sector, academia, researchers, because each and every one of us have a role to play to ensure that scalability can become a reality. And this is the reason that resulted to the establishment of the Ecosystem-Based Adaptation for Food Security Assembly, which was led by the UN Environment with its sister UN agency, Food and Agricultural Organization, IFAD, with non-state actors, civil societies, the private sector, coming together to constitute this inclusive framework to ensure that to work in complementarity for accelerated synergy, which is quite very, very important. But connecting the dots within a framework must be able not just to leverage on what works, but also to ensure that people's skills are leveraged, their professional skills, their talents are leveraged, so that silos can actually be put aside for complementarity and for synergistic actions. And this is what we're calling innovative volunteerism, where your talents, your skills, in what you are doing can contribute not only to bringing conservation agriculture to scale, but as a result of doing so, actually help provide an opportunity for you to make more money, but not at the expense of the environment, but at the same time addressing challenges that have been talked about for quite so long. And this is what we can be able to do. But for this to happen practically, using practical experience, there are 5 propositions that should be actually taken into consideration. The first is what I've highlighted, is we must be able to ensure that on-farm production, utilizing climate-smart agricultural techniques, must be added value to what is produced using these at the on-farm level. Because what we know is that a man does not wander away from where his corn is roosting. This African proverb tells us that Africa, with 65% of uncultivated arable land, with 10% of internal renewable freshwaters, with the abundant youthful population that represents not only the tip of the spear, but the embodiment of Africa's demographic dividend, if we are able to look at these catalytic sectors of agriculture and also of energy, with the continent having 365 days of sunshine, we can be able to add value to not only ensure that we leverage on already existing policy frameworks that exist in the continent, whether it is African Union Agenda 2063, a notable development from the African Ministers of Environment, highlighting these catalytic sectors to be amalgamated, to be integrated, so that we can expand the continuum and create more jobs, protecting the environment and contributing to macroeconomic growth. Because for this to happen, we will not only be ensuring that we're creating an incentive, but actually, it will actually be providing opportunities for millions across the entire continent. For example, in Cameroon, stakeholders are integrating off-grid small hydro directly to power agro-processing of cassava and Irish potatoes produced using nature-based into varied product lines and connecting using information communication technology to markets. And this is creating enterprises that has engaged 500 women farmers to grow cassava and potatoes using using nature-based actions like conservation agriculture. And this is providing a market incentive to upscale climate-smart agricultural techniques like conservation agriculture and provide a very practical area to engage. The second proposition is policy harmonization, bridging policy gaps through interministerial policy coherence to scale climate-smart agriculture and conservation agriculture is a crucial example, because what we know is that a single bracelet does not jingle. While conservation agriculture and nature-based agricultural techniques are uniquely positioned to drive climate resilience to meet Africa's socioeconomic priorities, this cannot be achieved in silos. The Ministry of Agriculture will have to work with the Ministry of Energy. The Ministry of Energy will have to ensure that instead as they add value, transport and infrastructure must be able to connect farms to markets and energy, decentralization of clean energy to where production is happening. And these will reduce not only post-harvest losses that are costing the continent, but at the same time also provide an incentive to produce. And for example, right here in Kenya, the interagency policy task force that has been constituted within the Ministry of Agriculture, called the Kenya Ebafusa Interagency Policy Task Force, is actually bridging gaps and helping to operationalize the climate-smart strategy of Kenya under the Ministry of Agriculture, making sure that the Ministry of Environment policy on green energy strategy and the Ministry of Industrialization, National Industrialization Policy and the provisions of the Finance Act, especially exemptions on inputs for manufacture of pesticide under the National Treasury, all this coming together, ensuring policy coherence provides an opportunity because policy is the biggest driver of change. Distinguished colleagues, the third proposition is market standardization. The African proverb that goes that if the cockroach wants to roll over the chicken, then it must hire the fox as a bodyguard. While comical in the context of our discussion, this African proverb tells us one thing, that in today's market-driven economies, conservation agriculture and related nature-based approaches will have to master the market if they are to take root, if they are to be brought to scale. The scalability of conservation agriculture will happen if there is a market incentive to take this and bring this to the fore, a development that will require leveraging on robust market enablers. But on the 21st of March this year, 2018, the recent signing of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement represents the most robust market we have, which is to set a consolidated 1.2 billion strong market with a combined GDP of over 3.4 trillion US dollars. Provides that opportunity, but the question is, how can this become a market pull factor to scaling conservation agriculture across the continent? And right here in Kenya, and related nature-based approaches as we discuss here today. But what we know is that in each country across the continent, there are bureaus of standards. There are standards for organic, there are standards for clean energy. But they must be brought and put in a continuum. The dots must be connected so that what is produced at farm level, utilizing conservation agricultural techniques or climate-smart agricultural techniques, ecosystem-based adaptation agricultural techniques should be processed not using diesel power energy processes, but using clean energy. And these should be transported using fuel-efficient transportation. And this should also be connected to market using information communication technology to abate the high carbon footprint associated with conventional paper and physical processes. If this is done, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it is not only going to have a common standard that what is produced right here in Kenya can be able to fetch a market in Cameroon. And this common standard is what we're calling a Bafousa compliance standard, where we're not reinventing the wheel, but leveraging what is already in existing countries across all the 55 African countries to ensure that the application of this standard can create a market appeal amongst health and climate conscious consumers who are increasingly globally. It will also ensure that processed cassava from Kenya can be bought from a Nigerian supermarket with a peace of mind that the cassava is pure, it is natural, it is non-chemicalized, and that cannot compromise the consumer health. It will mean the high quality, that it is not adding to the emissions that are contributing to climate change, but at the same time also ensure that it leverage from the $1 trillion market. And the fourth, but not least, is innovative financing. Climate smart agricultural techniques, conservation agriculture, as a case study for climate smart agricultural techniques, is providing an opportunity. And this opportunity is because conservation agriculture is a risk averter. As earlier presenters highlighted, where these techniques and approaches have been used, they've not just averted drought, but even where it hasn't rained, yields have increased. It's not only resulted to restoring barren land, like in the Sahel, but it resulted in bumper harvests. It's not only resulted in ensuring that we can be able to protect the pollinators that contribute to 75% of the food production that we depend on, but at the same time, it can also rejuvenate soil aquifer. And so, utilizing innovative financing approaches where we're already working with banks and cooperatives, using this as a risk averter and also using risk-sharing facilities has actually proven that innovative ways to leverage financing can be done. And the last is information communication technology. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, information communication technology is not only for enhancing markets, but at the same time provides an opportunity because as we speak today, Africa is the world's fastest growing information communication technology market. As we speak here, 600 million to about 1 billion in venture capital investment is projected for Africa in this 2018. And a large amount will find its way to the savannah, Silicon Savannah, where we are today. This is significant. But how do we leverage information communication technology to ensure that conservation agriculture can actually be brought to scale? This could be accomplished through what we call Mbafosa, virtual Mbafosa, integrating processes. What is produced, you can be able to have one virtual stop shop where those producing, where those can be able to find clean energy vendors, where they can be connected to markets. And those producing using conservation agricultural techniques can be able to benefit from these markets. And this is providing an opportunity across the continent. For example, youth in West Africa has developed an application called AfroShop that is actually not only employing youth, but at the same time helping to bring to scale conservation agricultural techniques. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, with all these practical examples and also these ways to bring conservation agriculture to scale, this African proverb reminds us that by crawling, a child learns to stand. With what we know, there are no absence of conservation agricultural techniques across the continent and right here in Kenya. But what we know is that the wisdom from this proverb is that we must be able to work in complementarity to connect the dots from production to processing to market. Because connecting the dots is actually the DNA of transformational change. And this is the underlying premise that should be able to energize us. Because as we're speaking today, if there is an African going to bed with his or her stomach aching of hunger, that should matter to us. And if it matters to us, we must be able to bring not just to scale, but at the same time operationalize these actions. If there is a youth who is out there without a job but can be able to bring his or her skill to contribute to this scalability of conservation agriculture across the continuum, not only from on-farm production, that should matter to us. The future is connecting the dots. Thank you.